Have you ever thought about how Neville Longbottom's fate might be even sadder than Harry Potter's? What if the movies never truly showed the depth of his tragedy? In today's video, you will uncover the heartbreaking truth about his life. Neville Longbottom, clumsy, timid, and often the punchline of a joke. Throughout the Harry Potter series, he was mocked not only by the cruel Slytherins, but even by his fellow Gryffindors. To many viewers, he was just comic relief, a contrast that made the main characters seem smarter and braver. It wasn't until the final films that Neville was portrayed as a true hero. But even then, his story felt incomplete. In reality, his journey was far more painful, filled with tragedy that rivaled, even surpassed, Harry's own. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were brave Aurors who fought against Voldemort as part of the Order of the Phoenix. When the Dark Lord learned of a prophecy about a child who could destroy him, two families fit the description: the Potters and the Longbottoms. Voldemort chose to hunt Harry, but he sent his Death Eaters after Neville's parents. What followed was unspeakable. Frank and Alice were tortured for so long with the Cruciatus curse that they lost their minds. They weren't killed, but they were taken away from their son forever, locked in a hospital, unable to recognize him. Neville grew up an orphan with living parents, raised by his strict grandmother, who constantly compared him to the father he could never live up to. She doubted his abilities. Even his own family thought he might not be magical at all, resorting to terrifying tricks just to force his magic to appear. When he finally arrived at Hogwarts, things didn't get easier. Bullied mercilessly by Slytherins, ignored by Gryffindors, even underestimated by professors, Neville was always in the background. While Harry and his friends dove into adventure after adventure, Neville struggled to make friends or earn respect. But something changed. Slowly, he began to show the courage of a true Gryffindor. By the final battle, he wasn't just standing in the shadows. He was facing Death Eaters head-on, even striking the final blow by destroying Voldemort's last Horcrux, the snake Nagini. Yet, despite everything, his future felt strangely underwhelming. While Harry, Ron, and Hermione took on prestigious roles in the wizarding world, Neville became a professor of herbology. He married Hannah Abbott, not Luna Lovegood, despite hints of a connection between them in the books and movies. For someone who endured relentless bullying, a tragic childhood, and a lifetime of self-doubt, Neville proved himself a true hero. But was he ever given the recognition he truly deserved? Have you ever wondered what it really took for Neville Longbottom to become the hero he was in the final battle? What if his struggles weren't just about proving himself, but about surviving a world that had already given up on him? In today's video, you will uncover the untold story of how Neville fought not only against dark wizards, but against the doubts of everyone around him. Growing up in his grandmother's house was never easy. Augusta Longbottom, proud and unyielding, constantly reminded Neville of his father's greatness. She expected him to be just as brave, just as powerful, just as legendary. But Neville wasn't like his father. He wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the fastest, and he wasn't the most confident wizard in the room. Every time he stumbled or failed to perform a spell correctly, Augusta looked at him with disappointment, as if he was letting down the entire Longbottom name. He felt like a failure before he ever had a chance to prove himself. Even his own relatives questioned his magical abilities. His great-uncle once dangled him out of a window, hoping fear would awaken his powers. Neville didn't know what terrified him more, the possibility that he had no magic, or the fact that his own family was so desperate to force it out of him. When he finally showed his first sign of magic by bouncing unharmed after being dropped, the relief wasn't his own. It belonged to his grandmother, his uncles, the entire Longbottom legacy. He was officially a wizard, but instead of feeling proud, Neville felt like he had barely passed a test he didn't even know he was taking. Hogwarts was supposed to be a fresh start, but instead it only reinforced everything he had feared. His clumsiness made him an easy target for bullies. Draco Malfoy and the Slytherins had no trouble humiliating him whenever they had the chance. They stole his belongings, tricked him into embarrassing situations, and made sure he knew exactly where he stood on the social ladder, at the very bottom. Even within his own house, he didn't find the protection he had hoped for. The Gryffindors weren't cruel, but they weren't exactly supportive either. They saw Neville as a well-meaning but hopeless case, someone to laugh at rather than rely on. His first year was a disaster. He struggled with spells, had no natural talent for broomstick flying, and became the boy who lost Gryffindor house points instead of earning them. Even Professor Snape, who found ways to insult nearly every student, seemed to have a special disdain for Neville. The boy's fear of the potions master was so intense that when confronted with a boggart, a creature that takes the shape of your worst fear, it transformed into Snape himself. But something inside Neville refused to give up. He wasn't the strongest, the smartest, or the fastest, but he had something no one else could take away from him: persistence. No matter how many times he was knocked down, he kept getting back up. He kept trying, he kept pushing forward, even when no one believed in him. By his third and fourth year, things slowly began to change. He discovered a passion for herbology, a subject where he actually excelled. Professor Sprout recognized his talent, something no teacher had ever done before. For the first time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. But outside the greenhouse, the world was growing darker. The return of Voldemort wasn't just Harry's problem, it was personal for Neville. The man who had destroyed his parents was back. The Death Eaters who had tortured them into madness were free. His nightmares weren't just stories from the past. They were happening again. By his fifth year, he had stopped being the quiet, clumsy boy who got pushed around. He joined Dumbledore's army, learning real spells, training for real fights. The change wasn't instant. It took time, struggle, and more failures. But every time he was knocked down, he stood back up. The boy who once couldn't perform a simple spell was now dueling alongside Harry and his friends. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries was his first real fight. It was chaos, Death Eaters everywhere, friends falling. He wasn't ready, none of them were, but Neville fought. His wand was broken, his nose was bleeding, but he didn't run, he didn't give up. He kept standing, kept trying, kept fighting, even when it hurt. The next 2 years pushed him further than he ever imagined. With Dumbledore gone and Hogwarts under the control of Death Eaters, Neville became the unexpected leader of the Resistance. The once timid boy, who could barely stand up for himself, now stood against some of the most dangerous wizards in the world. He led secret meetings, helped students escape, took the punishments meant for others. He was tortured, beaten, but never broken. And then came the final battle. While Harry faced Voldemort, Neville had his own fight. He watched friends fall. He saw destruction all around him, but he didn't stop. He picked up the sword of Gryffindor, the same sword once wielded by the greatest heroes of the past, and he did what no one else could. He struck down Nagini, Voldemort's final Horcrux. He didn't need anyone's approval anymore. He didn't need recognition. He had done what had to be done, and he had done it without hesitation. After the war, the world moved on. Harry became an Auror, Ron joined the Ministry, Hermione transformed the wizarding world. But Neville? He took a different path. He became a professor teaching herbology at Hogwarts. To some, it might not have seemed like much, but for Neville, it was enough. He didn't need glory, he didn't need fame, he just wanted to help students the way he wished someone had helped him. But even in peace, shadows of the past remained. He visited his parents in St. Mungo's, just as he always had. They never recognized him. They never would. His mother still gave him candy wrappers as if they were the most precious gifts in the world, and Neville kept every single one. Despite everything, he found happiness. He married Hannah Abbott, ran a small pub alongside his teaching job, and finally lived without the weight of expectations pressing down on him. He was no longer the boy who couldn't stand up for himself. He was the man who had proven time and time again that true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing up, even when everyone else has given up. Neville Longbottom's story wasn't about being the chosen one. It wasn't about prophecy. It was about choice. The choice to keep fighting, the choice to keep believing in himself, the choice to never let the world define him. And in the end, that made him one of the greatest heroes of them all.